I'm Steve Northcutt. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to build some stairs. I'm going to build the stairs going from the first floor up to the second floor, and then from the first floor down into the basement. So we got two sets to do today. So I'll walk you through how I do it. We'll just see how I do it. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure what our rise is. So I've got 9 foot or 10 foot 1.5. So I will take that measurement, 10 foot 1.5, 10 foot 1.5 inches. I'll tell it that's my rise, and then it's giving me 7 5/8 is my riser. What I'll do is I'll write that down, the 7 5/8. I really don't like 7 5/8. I'd rather be a little bit less. So we'll just do some math here and we'll see. So the first measurements tell me is 7 5/8. Our rise was 10 foot 1.5, and that is with 16 risers. So what I would like to do is see what 17 risers does. So let's divide that by 17. That would give me 7 1/8. So now what I'm going to do, see how much room I've got. I'm going to see if I have enough room to do 17 risers, or if I got to stick with the 16 risers. The 16 risers, number 16 is going to be the last one. It's going to be the second floor. So I'm going to have 15 steps. I'm going to measure my run here to see how much room I got. I've got 150 inches to here. So the bare minimum that I'm allowed to do here is 10 inches on the depth of my tread. So 15 steps would get me to right there, which is that's kind of what I got to deal with. It looks like I'm going to be going to 7 5/8 on the riser, 15 on the treads. What I might do is make sure, I need to look on the plan to make sure, sometimes they'll have that last step kind of wrapping around the front. If they do, that can give me an extra step. But I'm pretty sure it was back behind it. So I'm going to double check on my plan to make sure where that's going to stop at. So now that I've got those measurements, I'm going to go lay out the stringer. I'll cut one, I'll bring it in here, I'll make sure it fits, make sure I didn't do anything wrong, and then I'll take it back out there and I'll trace out the next 3. I'll probably put four stringers on this one. This one we're gonna put a 2x4. We're gonna put just a little bit of a short wall, just enough where they can put a skirt board beside the treads, and then we'll put like a 1x6 on top. So I'm just gonna come up 4 or 5 inches past the tread, and it'll have a little wall right there. They're gonna do carpet on the stairs, like that vinyl flooring. Vinyl plank, so it's probably about 3/8. Between the carpet and 3/8, I could probably adjust a little bit for the flooring difference. Won't be a whole lot of difference on that. If it was like a major difference, then I would definitely have to adjust for that. So we're gonna go lay out our stairs, and then I also will crown the 2x12. I'm gonna cut on the crown side, because whenever you cut the stringers out, it's gonna want to round over a little bit. If you cut on the crown side, if it's crowned this way, when you cut it all out, it's gonna spring that way a little bit. So it still might have a little bit of a dip to it that you have to work with later. For the most part, it'll be somewhat straight. So now what I'll do is I'm going to go 7 5/8. So I'm going to put a mark at 7 5/8 and 10. So what I'll do is I'll line up that 10 inches here, and 7 5/8 over here, and that's the cutout for my stair. Now some places I'm getting away with 10 inches on my tread. Some places don't allow that. Some codes around here, they're still letting us do that. That's how they're still drawing the plans at 10 inches. I think they just changed it to where we're gonna have to start going 10 1/2. But for now, we're still allowed to do 10, which is good because we don't have a whole lot of room right there. And so whenever I'm marking, I will also mark, I like to mark on the edge of it too. That way, whenever I slide down for the next one, because this is kind of rounded over, I want to make sure I'm staying at the exact point that I need to be at. Because if you let it grow a 1/16 of an inch as you go, you could grow the whole thing in 16 risers. You could grow it a full inch, and so you don't want to do that because it could throw the angle. It could throw the angle off slightly, not that much, but it could be slightly. And so I'll just mark this all the way down. So all I'm going to do is mark one stringer. I will use this as my pattern for the next 3. Use this as a pattern for the next 3, because you could get off if you sit here and mark each one of them. You could get off slightly. You want them to all be the exact same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So this will be number 15 right here. So I need to mark one more. And so at the top of the stairs, so I'm going to add a 1x8 on the front of this. So there'll be a 1x8 here. I'm going to use just a 2x12 for the tread. So I'll have an 1.5 inches. I'll have another 1.5 inches on top. The trim guys, they don't used to. I would cut that 3/4 off of this, so I have the exact same measurement here. But the trim guys, they always want me to go ahead and add, since I'm adding a 1x here on the last step up at the top, they want me to go ahead and add a 1x here as well. They said it helps them with their trim, and so I'm not going to take anything off of the back side of this last step. I'm just going to leave it the 10 inches just the way it is. Now at the bottom, I will subtract for that 1.5 inches that I'm going to use on that tread. I'm going to count again. So I got 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. This is my last step, the first step. So I'm supposed to be 7 5/8. I'm going to take an 1.5 inches off, which will give me 6 1/8, and then we'll be 6 1/8 here. So now I just got to cut all these out, take it in there, make sure it fits. If it fits, I'll mark out 3 more, cut all those out, and then we'll go put it together. It's always nice to have not use the battery powered saws for this, because there's just not as much power. So I gotta go a little slower. We got one stringer cut. We're gonna take it in there and see if it fits. Okay. Yeah. Good. I've got all these crowned that way. So now it's bowed the opposite direction, even though we crowned it the other way originally. Since this one was crowned this way and now this one's kind of bowing that way, I've got to screw it in a couple different places to keep it even. So what I'll do is I'm going to line it up on the bottom side. That way across the bottom of all the strings, they're all the same. Sometimes the 2x12s are different widths slightly, and so I'd rather cut that extra off and just keep it all the same on the bottom side. So depending on how badly it's curved, usually I can get away with 2 in the middle, 1 on each end, and I have stacked them all up and cut them all at once with the 16-inch saw. But if that blade's off slightly, it throws the stringers off a little bit. And so I just don't do it that way. Trim guys like it when you take a little extra time and make them as even as possible. Now I'll go through and mark these. So I cut this guy off. I actually put a 2x4 on the front of that beam, and that's what that's sitting on. So whenever we go to finish it, I'll probably put a 2x10 across there, just kind of fill that whole space up, and then I'll sit right on that. And then also, whenever I'm marking, I gotta make sure that pencil lead's not getting up underneath there. So I gotta kind of pull that down and kind of make sure that that's marking true. I don't want to mark it up underneath there, because then that can make the measurement won't be the same. So I kind of push that down as I go. I could put the screws out here, but what happens if you do that, sometimes it'll break these off if it puts too much pressure on them. So when you're just pushing down on it, you can kind of gauge if you're putting too much pressure on it. So I'll go through and I'll just mark each one of these. And I'll do this for all 3 of these other stringers. I use the same one to mark with, the same one for the pattern. That way hopefully we don't grow any. So I got that marked. Now I'll back my screws out and I'll just move it to the next one. for obvious reasons, so nobody falls off in there. A lot of guys will say there's no need for that while you're working because we know the dangers, we're not going to fall off in there, and that's how I am. But one of my guys was putting the flooring down. He was the one putting the flooring down. He was the one who covered the hole, and he was actually cutting the hole out for the stairwell. And he walked away, and he came back within 30 seconds. And I don't know if he didn't realize where the stairwell was, but he stepped where he was already cutting, and he fell into the basement. So even though we're professional, we know what we're doing, it's always good to have some kind of safety measures around hazards on the job site. Even though in our mind we think that we know what the hazards are, you know, we like to tie our guards back. It makes it a whole lot easier when you're doing the cutting. But the bad thing is, you have your guard tied back. Say the electrician needs to cut a block. He runs over, grabs your saw, doesn't realize the guard tied back. He cuts something, and then he sets it down on the ground, and he cuts himself or something. That's one of the dangers of, just because you may be good with using a saw that's the guard tied back doesn't mean everybody around you is. One guy, I'll get off on my little stories here. One guy had the guard tied back before we had cordless saws, and after you make a cut, we'd always just flip it over, set it down, and walk away. He cut, set it down, and went to walk away. The cord caught on his pencil. It yanked the saw off. Somehow, amongst all that, it came back and it cut the 2 tendons on top of his thumb, or 1 tendon, whatever it is. And so he was out for 3 months while his thumb healed. So I used to always have my guards tied back. I'm trying to stop doing that, but it's a bad habit that we all do because it makes it so much easier. I really can't stand having to hold this guard back. But now that my boys are getting old enough to where they're working on the crews, as a parent, I don't want to see the guards tied back because I don't want to see one of my kids get hurt. And so it makes you more conscious of things like that as you get older. Like, yeah, the dangers are more serious than what you actually thought they were whenever you're, 20, 25, 30. You think you're invincible whenever you're young, but as you get older, you realize that you're not as invincible as you once thought you were. So it's always good to take a little extra time, be a little bit more safe, and don't try to. You're not out to prove anything. Nobody really cares. As I get older, I realize that you think that everybody cares what you think or what you do, but they really don't. These 2x12s are yellow pine, and if you ever cut yellow pine, it can be a pain in the rear because as you're cutting, especially cutting wider widths, it tends to want to pinch the saw really bad. And so we're having to deal with that a lot. It takes a lot more power when you're cutting stairs because it's always trying to pinch that blade. Just because you're cutting so much meat out of it, it's always wanting to curl around on that blade. So not as much with the cordless saws, but with the other saws, the cordless saws tend to not kick back near as bad. But the ones with the cords, like me standing right here, is not as good because it could kick back, and I'm not in a good spot right there. So, with the cordless saws, it's not as big of a threat, but it still is a bad. It's really not the best situation to be in right here. So you got to make sure you got a good hold of that saw, and especially worm drive saws. They have a lot more power. A worm drive saw to cut stair stringers, but I don't even have a worm drive anymore, other than the 10-inch saw. So we just use these saws. But the worm drives has a lot more power. The blade's on the other side, and so to me it's a lot easier. Being right-handed, it's a lot easier to have that blade on the other side. Since we're gonna have a wall on both sides of the stairs, I'm gonna set these stringers 1.5 inches off the wall. That way they got room for their, they can drywall, they can run their skirt board up, and that way they're not having to notch around all the steps. And so what I'll do is I'll take a 2x4 and I'll just mark it the same angles as the stringer. I'll make it flush on the bottom. So I have one for each side. So now I'll cut 2 of these. Now when I go to nail the stringers on, I'll put this on first. I'll nail this to the wall first, and then I'll nail the stringer to that. And that sets it out 1.5 inches. That way they can run their drywall, the skirt board. The skirt board is usually 3/4. Drywall is 1/2 inch. That gives us an extra 1/4 inch for if something's off a little bit, they can still get their skirt board in there. No problem. I need I'm gonna rip something to put right there.
If you need my pullbacks on, I'll do it.
Okay. I'm gonna try to find the straightest one. I'm gonna set it on there, make sure we're good at the top. If it's good and straight, then I'll just mark the bottom side of it all the way down, and then I'll screw my 2x4 to the wall. If it's not straight, if it's got a bow to it, then I'll just mark the top and the bottom, and I'll snap a line. That way I get that nice and straight. Okay. I think I'm down. I should be. I should be 7 and. What was this one? 7 5/8. 7 5/8 plus 3/8. So I should be 7. Should be 8 inches. So I gotta go up. I gotta go up 1 inch. Now I'll go through it, I'll just screw this to the 2x4. Okay, so when we do our treads, we're gonna cut a 45. We're gonna knock the corners off right here and right here. That way that carpet can bend around that a little bit easier. I could take a router and just round it off, but I'm just gonna use it, do a 45 on it.
You don't have a router?
I just don't have one here. Okay, so we got our wall built, we got our stringers in. Now we're gonna put our risers and our treads on. And so, one thing I gotta do while I'm putting them in, I gotta make sure I maintain that 1.5 inch right here. So as I'm going up, I want to be able to keep that 1.5 inch, because sometimes these stringers, after you cut them, they might curl out or curl in. If they curl in a little bit, it's not the end of the world. It's not that big a deal. But whenever they curl out, then that's when you have a problem, because you're going to have a 1/2 inch drywall, and you're going to have a piece of 3/4 that's going to try to slide in there. And if this thing if it's rolled out just a little bit, when a guy goes to put his skirt board in there, it won't go in there, and then he's got to sit there and try to deal with it. The trim guy will have to sit there and try and deal with that. So we try to make sure we keep 1.5 inches all the way up through there while I'm putting the stairs together. I got to make sure it doesn't grow a little bit as I'm going, and so I'll be periodically checking to make sure. So as I'm screwing these on, I'll try to make sure these things stay flush. And I usually screw the bottom first because that's going to be where it's closer to where it's supposed to be at, and then I can move that top in or out slightly if I need to. You can't move it a whole lot, otherwise it'll just break it off. But you can pull them a little bit here and there. So then we just try to make sure to stay flush across the top. I'll go through and I'll put 4 or 5 of these on, and then I'll put the treads on, and I'll do 4 or 5 more, and then I'll put the treads on, and I'll just work my way up that way. And I usually glue the face. That way when this goes up against it, it's glued here. And then whenever I glue the tread, I'm going to glue here, all across here. I'm going to glue along here. I want everywhere there's wood touching, I'm going to put glue there, because I don't want that thing to squeak at all. And then once I get everything on, a lot of times I'll go back and I'll put another bead of glue on that inside joint. I just like to put glue everywhere just to make sure it doesn't. I don't want to have any squeaks because it's hard to track down a squeak after the fact. Now if it's unfinished underneath, you can always go underneath and put more screws in later if there is a squeak. But if this has got a drywall ceiling, you can't get to it later after the fact. So I try to put as much glue and as many screws in it as I can to keep from any squeaks happening. So we're gonna go through and I'll get a bunch of these put in. And if for some reason I can't get quite flush, maybe the middle is high a little bit. If I can't, if I'm already going, I'm not gonna be able to. If it's just a little bit, I'd rather this one be just a hair high than have it down, because I don't want a gap. I really don't want a gap between the tread and this. So if I'm gonna have any gap anywhere, I'd rather it be right here, because I can always put extra liquid nails there, and it'll kind of help float that out. This one is slightly rolled out a little bit, so I'm making sure it's flush right here. I'm getting this one screwed, and then I'll push this down, and that'll kind of help pull that over a little bit. And then I come over here and make sure. Right now I'm just a little bit short. So what I'll do now is take a 2x4 and kind of pull this. I'm going to pull that over just a little bit to make sure. This side would be fine, but I don't want this side to start tightening up on me a little bit, because then it could be problematic down the road. So that was already a little bit tight right there. So now, if I'm by myself, I'll just take something and stick it in here. Just kind of help hold it while I shove that over. I'll make sure I'm flush on top. Now, if they were doing finished treads like hardwood, I may not even put these on, because they may put a finished face on there. So you got to find out beforehand what the trim guy is going to do. So they're wrapping this in carpet, so I'm completely putting the risers and the treads on there, gluing it and screwing it. And maybe they're going to get that pre-finished 1-inch tread or 1.1/8" tread, whatever they get. Then they're going to take what I put on there off, so whatever I put on there just be temporary. So you got to know that before you go through the trouble of putting all this on there. So now I'll put this guy on here. Make sure I'm flush here, make sure I'm flush back here. and then I'll usually go through and put a. I usually go through and put some glue right here too. Probably not necessary. It's nice and tight underneath here. It's screwed down. We shouldn't have any squeaks. So if you don't glue it back here, a lot of times this right here could move slightly and squeak a little bit. I've had that before I was gluing that. I would always have squeaks right there. So then I would just, for a while I was just separating. I was just keeping this. I would just open it up about 1/8 of an inch. That way it never could rub. But I thought it looked better if it was just tight. It was glued. I thought it looked more like a finished product versus having a gap in there. I didn't like having a gap. So this is how I do it now. Okay, so these stairs, we got the upper stairs done. It's at the end of the day, it's 4:45.
There's a hope that is burning in my soul, and it grows just like an ocean wave. There's this storm cloud in my way, and it keeps on pouring.